The village of Calofen had been afraid of the orc woman on the hill for 63 days before Oswin Gale noticed she watched his bees. He was 70 years old, a retired beekeeper with a bad knee and no particular fear of large things, having kept hives on the moorland above the village for 40 years. He had seen the rumors collect in the valley below the way water collects in hollow, fast, and without much thought for what flows in. She had come in late autumn. She camped in the lee of the old quarry stones, quarter-mile above his apiary, and came down to the village only on market mornings. Every door she approached found a reason to be closed. The miller's boy ran to tell anyone who would listen that she had tusks and hands like shovels and eyes that counted your sins. Oswin, spoken to the miller's boy exactly once, and found him unreliable, paid this no mind. What he noticed over several quiet mornings was that she stood at the moorland's edge and watched his hives with an expression he recognized. It was the expression of a person who had once known something well and was remembering it from the outside. He left a jar of late-harvest honey on the low wall between his top field and the open moor. He put no note with it. He went back to his hives. The jar was gone by evening. She came to the wall 4 days later in the flat gray light of an early November afternoon. She was tall, a full head taller than Oswin, broad-shouldered, green-skinned, dark braids shot through with copper thread, and a face that the valley had apparently decided was frightening. She was carrying the empty jar. She set it on the wall without a word, turned it once with one finger and looked at him. "You can keep it," Oswin said. He was working a loose hin in the nearest hive box and did not look up. "I have 40 jars." She didn't leave. After a moment she said, in a voice lower than he expected and rougher, "The gold-banded variety. You don't see that kept usually. Too temperamental." "They are," he agreed, "but the honey's worth it." She looked at the hives for another long moment. Then she left without telling him her name. He didn't ask for it. He had not been in the habit, these last 6 years since his wife Hedda died, of demanding things from people. She came back 5 days after that, and then 3 days after that, and by the second week of November, she was arriving most afternoons, sometimes saying nothing at all, sometimes asking him something careful and specific. About the temperament of the gold-banded colony, about the way he'd positioned the winter wraps, about the particular heather variety on the south slope that she said she hadn't seen used for forage at this altitude. He answered what she asked. He didn't ask her anything back. He made tea on the little iron brazier he kept near the hives on cold afternoons, and he poured 2 cups, and he set one on the wall, and that was the extent of what he required of her. The valley, when it noticed, was not pleased. His neighbor Pell came up the track one afternoon, with a look of genuine concern, and told him he was going to get himself killed. Old Wren at the inn sent her grandson up with a similar message, more colorfully phrased. A man from the lower farms whose name Oswin could never remember stood at the gate for 10 minutes explaining the situation as he understood it, which was that the orc woman was dangerous, had been banished from her clan for something unspeakable, and was almost certainly waiting for an opportunity. For what opportunity? Oswin asked. The man could not specify. Oswin thanked him for coming up the hill and went back to his bees. Her name was Mora. She told him on a Thursday in late November, when the first real freeze had come down, off the high moor, and the light was already going at 4 in the afternoon. She said it the way a person says a word they haven't used in a while, testing whether it still fits. He told her his name was Oswin. She already knew. The valley had given her that much. She asked him how long he'd kept bees on this hill, and he told her 40 years, since he was 30, since his wife had suggested it as a cure for his restlessness, and she had been right, as she was about most things. Mora was quiet for a moment. Then she said that she had been an herbalist. Had been, the 2 words, carried a weight he didn't probe. He said that the moorland above the quarry stones was extraordinary country for an herbalist if she had the inclination. Good light on the south face. He had identified, over 40 years, something close to 60 medicinal varieties without trying particularly hard. She looked at him. "You know medicinal plants." "My wife did. I learned by watching her." He paused. "I still walk the high ground in spring to see what's come up habit." That was all he said. He did not ask what she had been before she was an herbalist. He did not ask what the unspeakable thing was that the valley had decided she'd done. He poured the tea and she sat on the wall and the light went, and it occurred to him later, walking back down to his cold house, that she had been a little less careful that afternoon than she had been before. December came in hard. She moved her camp into the old quarry overhang, which was at least out of the wind, and Oswin left, without mentioning it to her, a folded oilskin and a small bag of oats on the wall. Both were gone the next morning. He began quietly, things on the wall on cold days. Nothing that required thanks, nothing that announced itself. A block of tallow, a paper of dried rosehip, a tied bundle of the Southland yarrow she had once mentioned in passing as difficult to find at altitude. In January she began to talk. Not about what had brought her to the moorland above Callofen, not at first, but about her work. About plant compounds and their interactions, about the way cold-pressed oils carried medicine differently than dried preparations, about a technique for treating infected wounds, with a particular lichen that she had spent 11 years developing and had never written down because there had always been someone to tell it to, and now there was not. She talked the way a person talks who has been quiet for a very long time, carefully at first, and then less carefully. And Oswin listened the way he always listened, which was without interrupting and without looking away. He found, somewhere in the third week of January, that he was looking forward to 4 o'clock the way he had not looked forward to anything in 6 years. She told him in February, one still afternoon when the snow had come back and the world was very quiet, that she had been the foremost herbalist of the Eastern clans, the keeper of their medical tradition, the teacher of 30 apprentices, the woman summoned to 3 councils and written to by healers from places he had never heard of. She said it without particular pride, as a statement of fact that she had not been able to say out loud since autumn. She said that her last apprentice, a young woman she had raised since the girl was 14, had died in an epidemic that Mora had not been able to stop, despite everything she knew. She said that she had asked her clan council for a season of leave, and they had given it, and she had walked. She had walked until she ran out of walking, which had been the moorland above Callofen. The valley thought she had been banished. She had not. She had been the one who left. Oswin was quiet for a long moment. Then he said that grief had its own seasons in his experience, and that 63 days on a cold hill was not an unusual length for it, and that she seemed to him like a person who was finding her way back to herself, was the hardest and most important journey a person could make. She didn't answer. She sat on the wall for another hour, and when she left, she walked a little differently than she had arrived. In the first week of March, 4 riders came into Callofen from the eastern road. They were orc healers, 2 men and 2 women, wearing the clan's travel colors, and they asked at the inn for a woman named Mora. Old Wren sent them up the hill because she had seen by then enough of the comings and goings from Oswin's apiary to know where to send them. Mora met them at Oswin's gate. Oswin stood a little back, near his wall, not wanting to be in the way. The healer, who seemed to be senior, a large, gray-braided woman, said that the council had grown worried, that her leave had stretched past what anyone had expected. Her apprentices were asking for her, that she was needed. Mora was quiet for a moment. The valley, which had found reasons to be doing things on the upper road that morning, was very still. Then she turned and looked at Oswin, at his bees and his wall and his little iron brazier with its 2 cups, at the 40 years of patient work visible in every hive box, at the man himself, 70 years old and unhurried, who had not once in 4 months asked her for anything. She said, in a voice that carried clearly down the slope, "This man's land carries 61 medicinal varieties. He identified them over 40 years alongside his wife, and he walks the high ground every spring to see what's come up. He doesn't know what he has." She reached into her coat and set on the wall a folded record. Pages she had been writing across the winter, Oswin realized. The 11 years of technique she had said she had never written down, along with every plant she had catalogued on his moorland, and how each one be used. "When the council wants to know where I spent my leave," she said to the gray-braided healer, "tell them I spent it here, being reminded what I knew." She looked at Oswin one more time, and what was in her face was something quiet and difficult to name. Gratitude, too. Large for the word, and something warmer underneath it. "I'll come back in spring," she said. For the Heather survey, if that suits you. Oswin looked at the wall, at the 2 cups, at the long cold months that had been against all expectation, the least alone he had felt in 6 years. It suits me, he said. The riders left with Mora, and the valley watched them go. And not one soul on the upper road that morning could have said, afterward, exactly when it was that they had stopped being afraid of her.